In this video, we will look at errors with hypothesis testing. So remember, the idea of a hypothesis test is we gather sample data and then we look at this data and try to determine whether the data tends to support or contradict our hypothesis. So since the decision is based on sample data, there is the possibility of an error. And so in statistics, we classify these as two possible errors, type 1 error and type 2 error. So a type 1 error occurs when a true H0 is rejected. So this is the case where the null hypothesis is in fact true, but we incorrectly reject it. So alpha is denoted as the probability of a type 1 error. Sometimes alpha is called the significance level of the test. Now alpha is preset. Remember, in our hypothesis testing procedure, at the beginning when we set our null and alternative hypothesis, we determine what alpha is. Typically alpha is 0.05, sometimes 0.01. So we can generally control type 1 error at the beginning of our experiment. Now type 2 error is when a false HO is not rejected. So this is the case where the null hypothesis is in fact false, but we fail to reject it, hence a type 2 error. We usually denote type 2 error with the Greek letter beta. In general, beta is much more difficult or more work to calculate. So here's a table kind of illustrating the idea of the two types of errors. So type 1 error, alpha, is our type 1 error rate. This is when we reject H0 when we shouldn't have. So this would be a type 1 error. Beta is our type 2 error. So this is where HO was false, but we failed to reject it. Hence a type 2 error. So a couple examples of errors in the context of a problem. Suppose we're looking at a particular cold medicine and we want to determine whether it's effective or not. So we do some research and find that the average duration of a common cold is about 7 days. So if we take this cold medicine, does it reduce the recovery time or make shorter time for symptoms and things like that? So if we set up a hypothesis like this, the common cold on average lasts 7 days. So we'll start there. That's our null hypothesis. That the normal 7 days, whether we're taking the medicine or not, doesn't affect it. No effect. Versus if this medicine is effective, it should reduce the number of days with symptoms. So the alternative would be mu less than 7. So if we think about type 1 and type 2 error in this context, type 1 error would be rejecting the null, rejecting there's no effect, concluding the medicine is effective when in fact it is not. That would be a type 1 error in the context of this problem. A type 2 error would mean we failed to reject. In other words, the medicine is really working, but we failed to conclude that or failed to get enough evidence to say that conclusively. Type 1 and type 2 errors.